Muted.
Okay. All right. So what we're going to see now is a concept in SAP called as LSMW. So LSMW basically stands for Legacy Systems Migration Workbench. Okay. And so Legacy System Migration Workbench, as you can see here, is what LSMW stands for. And the whole purpose of this tool that SAP has provided is to load data into SAP. Okay. So keep in mind, when we are trying to, when you are going live as a part of your cutover activities, one of the steps that you will be doing, not just one of the steps, one of the important list of things to do is to load data. So it could be mass data, it could be transactional data, right? So so when you're going live for an existing organization, keep in mind the company is already running on some other system, and now you're going live with SAP. Then obviously you need to bring data from that system into your system, which is obviously SAP in this case, right? So now, in our, example, process that we are implementing, it's a brand new process. We have a finished product that we are manufacturing here. We have a bill of material. We have a material master. We have a bill of material. We have, raw materials that we are buying, and so our data is very limited in our case. But in larger implementation, the volume of data is high. And it's literally impossible for somebody to go and create material master manually, create vendor master manually, create info records, create source list, create initial inventory situations. Keep in mind, that one example, we already as a company that's running and they are transacting and they have inventory in their warehouse. You need to bring the same inventory into SAP also, right? That's loading initial inventory balances, loading existing production orders, loading existing purchase orders, loading that, loading this. End of the day, every single transaction that we saw so far in our implementation could potentially be loaded in mass, right? So you can create material master manually, you can create vendor master manually, but how many can you create? Hundreds and thousands? It's not worth it, right? So one of the tools SAP has provided, it's been there for a very long time, is LSMW. Okay. Now also keep in mind, nowadays companies are moving away from LSMW and they are going into other tools, third-party tools. Like we have tools provided by WinShuttle or Back Office or Innovera, and you will see tons and tons of tools available in the market that actually does data load process into SAP or any software. In our case, let's talk about SAP, right? So those tools are very easy to use, and obviously you have to pay them to get those licenses and all. And once you have that software implemented, then obviously you can do similar process as we're going to do today in basically creating your data load solution. Now, so one of the important items, like it's already mentioned in a cutover process, is to load required data. So in our case, we have one material, we have 4 or 5 raw materials, we have one bill of material, we have one routing, we have, our data is small, but once the company decides to expand, once it starts bringing in more raw finished products, more raw materials, and more processes into SAP, we need to build those data in SAP, right? So it's not something like I already mentioned, can't be done manually. So that's why we have a concept like data load, and LSMW is a transaction code to go into this screen. And then obviously, you have you have to do certain steps here. Now, some of the steps might look very weird if you're looking from functional point of view, but the steps are pretty much standard, okay? And once you practice with one set of process for data load, it's typically the same for every single process, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to record a new LSMW transaction to load material master, create material masters. Like you can go to MM01 and you can create material master, right? So I'm going to create a material master in mass using LSMW process here. All right, so I'm going to give a name So I'm going to call it as ZMAT3, which is my new project. And going to call it a sub-project, and my object is this. So keep in mind, these are all technical terminologies that has to be set up before we go and do some things. And these are all just, objects. We are creating a project. Under the project, we could have multiple sub-projects and multiple objects. If you're trying to do the same, for example, you can create a material master, you can change a material, you can delete a material. So all these things can be different sub-projects or objects and all. So, but let's keep it very simple, and you practice first, and then we can add more complexities eventually. So what happens, I'm going to do is I'm going to create an entry first, the ZMAT3, and I'm going to call this as material creation. And sub-project is also, in my case, is creation, right? And the object is also creation. Now, why am I doing all these things? It's just for the sake of simplicity, but there could be many reasons why you keep different ideas, names here. All right, so once I have my initial structure, not structure, it's like a template for a project now created, then I go and click continue, and it brings me all variety of steps that I need to know, that I need to do to make this process work. All right, so obviously the first is object attributes. So for my object ZMAT3, so what are the things that I need to set, that I need to set up? So in my case, I'm going to say, okay, this is going to be one time only load, but I can use it however I want. Then I'm going to do batch input recording. So basically, I'm going to record a transaction one time, and I'm going to make SAP to capture the recording and I want SAP to use the recording for future mass load purposes. There are a couple of options like batch input, that, you can do BAPIs, you can do IDOC. There are multiple different options of, loading data into SAP. Obviously BAPIs is much faster, or batch input may be faster than batch input recording. And, we can also load through IDOCs too, which is a whole different process. But either way, so let's do the most commonly used and most, and easy to create, from functional point of view. All you care is, if you have, the load data, you can choose, batch input recording. So just click on batch input recording, and you go and try to create a recording first, okay? So I'm going to create a recording. I'm going to click on create recording, and I'm going to go to MM01 transaction, and I'm going to say MM01 with description, and then I go into it. The transaction code is MM01, and then it takes me to MM01. You see this? It takes me to MM01, so I'm going to choose chemical industry, material type is finished product, and then I click enter, and I'm going to, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to do basic data 1 only. I'm clicking on basic data 1, and then I'm going to put SAM test material 1, and obviously a mandatory field is base unit of measure, so I'm going to put eaches, and then I click save, and I click enter. Since I chose only one view here, so it says I cleared. I said yes. So now you see, SAP has already filled up a lot of technical details around, field names and all those things. So now, obviously, they all are meant for certain purposes, which more technical guys will understand. But from functional point of view, we have to just, ensure that we click on default all, and that will basically give all the information that is needed, that we need to capture on our template. So these are the fields that needs to be on the template. So what I did is I created a template for for the fields here. So let me see. So all these fields, so MB, RSH, MTART, KZ, what I'm MAKTX, MEINS, these are the fields that SAP has already identified, because every time you go and put a value in the recording, it identifies this value, this value, this value, right? If you put in industry sector, you put in material type, you clicked on the checkbox for basic view 1, you put in a short text in the material description, and you also put in the field, unit of entry, right, unit of measure. So it recorded all those fields that needs to be entered and says, okay, here are the fields. So MB, RSH, MTAR, KZSEL 01, MAKTX, MEINS. So I captured all these fields that that I will be, using in my template, right? So now we are building a structure in SAP, but eventually you're loading data using a template. Okay, we'll come back to that, in a real few minutes here. So I click save. Once I click default, I'll click on default oil, or you click save, and then you see data is saved. You go back, and then obviously you will see, it populated some, values and all based on what you gave for recording. You go back again, and then here you identify whatever the recording you just did. MM01 is the recording you did, right? So you put in the recording that you did, you click save. You go back, SAP already went to the second option here. The first option is done. It takes you to the second option. Now you're creating a structure. Okay, keep in mind you're trying to load data from your template into SAP, and you need to have a structure defined in SAP so that your structure can copy those values from your template and load into SAP. Okay, more technical stuff, but let's follow through this process, and then once you start doing it, you gain more experience. So then you basically click on create. You create a structure. So ZMAT3 is my structure. And then the structure gets created here, and then you assign values to the field to the structure, right? So the structure is nothing but combination of fields, right? It's like a table, right? Table has fields. So structure is not a permanent table. It's for intermediate purpose, for loading purpose. So then it takes me to source fields. I click execute here, and then I go and choose my structure. I click my change icon here, and then I go and copy fields. So now I'm copying what are the fields that I need to put into my structure. So I'm going to upload from a text file. Keep in mind I have a text file. I copied all my fields called matload. I'm going to copy the same data from my text files. So let me go to my I think it's matload. So matload is my file. And it brought me these files, field names, right? These are the field names you capture during your recording. These are fields that I took it and put it into my notepad file, and my notepad file is I just put it in my notepad file in this order, in this sequence and all, right? So once I attach my fields to my structure, I click save, and then I go back, and then it takes me to the another option, structure relations. So here I have my initial structures and my relations assigned and all. So basically, it automatically assigns. So I think we are good here in terms of my recording is assigned to the structure ZMAT3. Okay. So I just go in and just click save, just for the sake of doing it. And then we don't have to do anything. No, I guess we have to do it. So in this field mapping and conversion rules, don't worry about conversion rules here because we're going to do straightforward recording. So you see all my fields are associated with my structure, and I click change. And I go to extras and I do auto field mapping. Okay, click change, go to extras, do auto field mapping, and it opens up. The SAP is automatically mapping my the fields here. So I click enter for every single field. So accept proposal, keep accepting the proposals, and then all mapping is done. It changes. Now if you see ZMAT3 MBRSH is and puts all the field names associated with this, my structure, my field name is all associated with my, my recordings here. So it's just a step to connect all the dots together before we even start, loading data. Now we are trying to build a template in SAP, right? We're trying to set up the, template in SAP. Once we set it up, that's it. Every other time we just keep loading data into SAP. So now we are just at the point of we did our field mapping and we don't have to worry about fixed value translation and all those things. Next thing I want to do is specify the file name. So if I go in here and I click execute, I'm going to load data from a PC in this case. You can load data from your application server in the Unix folder and all those things. But let me choose my PC and then and I basically create add entry, click add entry. And I will want to go and put in a tabular column, LCUI, and then I choose the file that I created. So I created mat data file. We'll see what the file looks like. And I say it's material create, right? So make sure you choose tabular column here because that's how you are setting up your, your flat file or your Excel file, whatever that is. And I click save. Keep in mind, I just went in the change. I added my file name that I'm going to choose from my PC. All right, good. That's it. So that's pretty much it from creating the template point of view. So you create an object, you create a source structure, you created fields under source structure, you create a relationship with your recordings, and then you map all the fields properly, and then you also identified the the file that needs to be used. So now the next step is read data. So let's look at the file for a second. So I have this mat data file that I created. So chemical industry, food, X, test 1, 3. So I'm going to do test 1, Sam. So you see everything is tab limited. So here's a tab. So this to this is a tab. This to this is a tab, and this is a tab. So basically this data is nothing but every value that SAP is expecting from you if you're doing it manually. Keep in mind, we went into MM01, sorry, and we tried to choose the industry sector, choose the material type. So that's what you have in your data file: material type, industry sector, material type, and then you obviously chose your press enter. You chose your basic view one. You can choose two, but you record it again. Then you click enter. Then you put in your your description. You put in your BSW measure. So everything that you capture as a field is tab delimited on your file, flat file. It could be your Excel file, it could be a flat file, but as long as tab delimited, in this example, you have a different way of doing it, but let's focus on the most easy, simple way. And then once you have these data set up in the tab delimited format, your data file is ready, okay? Your template is ready in SAP that you just built. Your data file is ready. The next thing is obviously load the file. So you go and, assign file. Here's matdata.txt in my D colon. And then I go and read data. So it's reading data. And it obviously takes me to the screen. I'm going to execute it. It says you want to remember this settings because SAP is trying to be secure and all. So I say allow. It read 5 transactions. Did it read 5 transaction on my data load file? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 transactions. So I have 5 different descriptions here just to track them. So yeah, so I have 5 transactions. So it did read 5 transactions. Let me go back, and it takes me to display read data, right? So it already read data. So I'm going to display all my data, and then it did read my industry, material type. That's the basic data, 1 check mark. Description, unit of measure. It did read 5 data, 5 records from my file. Then you go and convert your data. You convert your data to SAP understandable data based on the structure and all those things that you have already defined. So you read your data from your flat file, and obviously SAP is saying, okay, so file read, file written. So it has done, whatever it needs to do, reading the data from your file. So let's look at, go back and let's look at display converted data again. So it did come back and say all the data that's converted. So this is more understandable because it's more SAP fields and data here. So you see all the field type, industry sectors, checkbox, and all those things. And then the next step obviously is create batch input session. Okay, so it automatically takes you to the next option. You click execute. Click execute again, and then it says 1 batch input with 5 transaction recorded because they're trying to create 5 material masters. So batch input is a concept where you're running, you're loading your mass, your mass loading data into SAP as a part of batch input recorded session that we did in the initial first option here. So it just created the batch input session, but you need to go and run them. So we just go and click execute. Yes, you see the ZMAT3 that we just created about 8:53 a minute, about a few seconds back, and it's waiting to be run with 5 records in it, but obviously nothing has been run. So I'm going to choose this. I'm going to do process. When I do process, there are a couple of options here. I can run it in my foreground. I can run it in my background. If you have hundreds and thousands of records, background makes sense. If you have a few records, you can run it in your foreground. Automatically, SAP will do what it needs to do. Now let me do it in background. Even though it's 5 records, usually it's advisable to do the background. So SAP will allow all the resources accordingly. Then I say process. So it says 1 session transfer to background processing. So we need to wait. This is done. Let's give a few seconds here. So if you see, it just ran at 8:54, about just a few seconds back, and it created these materials automatically. So 58, 59, 60, 61, 62. So let's open 58. I just clicked on log and I came here. So let's go to MM03, 58. And obviously it has basic view, or SAP does put some other views also depending on how you set it up. And you see this description test 1 SAM. It's out of my flat file here. So let's look at my other material that it created, 62. 62. And you will see my description is test 5 SAM, which is the same exact thing that I just created. So, and the date of creation, obviously, you can find from, where's my display changes. 8:54, 23 seconds, about a minute back. The user ID, you actually created this particular material today. So that gives you information about what was done. So we created general data. We just got some kind of 811 client and material number is being created, and then we actually created the unit of measure and all those things. So that's typically, on a high level, in a very simple manner, what LSMW can do. So now once we created, the first batch successfully here, once you tried it out, that's it. You go back again, and tomorrow, once business again decides to change a material master or add new material master, you go to LSMW, you go into your project, it's already there. Okay, so everything recorded is already there. All you have to do is go directly to assign files. Put your data into D:, assign files, make sure the file is assigned correctly, then you read your data again. And then it will bring up all the record. This time we could have much more data. So let's take a quick look, and I'm going to I loaded a whole bunch of data here, so I'm going to read data again. This time we got 35 records because I just loaded 35 probably records there. So, and then now obviously the whole process continues. So once you record your template, once you know what kind of flat file you need to build, then that's it. But it's not an easy process sometimes. Sometimes the data is corrupted. Sometimes when your legacy system is sending data, it's not formatted properly. You have extra space, the extra comma. It's probably not in Unicode. It's in a different language. Most of the problem that we face here is the structure of this file. Building the structure of the file is very important. LSMW is an easy thing. Okay. So, but when you extract data, from your legacy system, as someone asked, the legacy system should have the capability to throw the file in this format. They could throw the file in a very different format, and you need to run programs to convert it into this format. Or somebody has to do data cleaning process or data cleansing process to prepare the right data load file or flat file or data load file so that can be successfully loaded, because you're testing with a file and you want to make sure the same exact format is, done. So looking into a notepad is a little different than looking into Excel sheet. Excel may have formatting, colors. You should not have colors. You should not have formatting. That's why Notepad works fine, but Notepad is also tricky sometimes because it cannot take a lot of data sometimes. Excel can have more data, and you need to, so you have to play around with it, and eventually, you'll be successful. It's not something that you can achieve immediately, but simple, straightforward creation, changing it all, easy to do. Sometimes, the data might be corrupted. It's very hard sometimes to even look at the smallest problem. If you have a small space here, the data might not load properly. So we have issues like that. So the attention is to be paid, given, especially when you create the file here. Now that's why, if you see in, this is tab, obviously tab delimiter here, right? So in specifying the file process, I think what we did is we did tabular as a delimiter. You could have comma, you could have blanks, you could have semicolon, but tabular is what I chose because it's easy to do and easy to understand. But you could have comma delimited Excel file or comma delimited file or .csv file that you can load as well. So you need to play with them first, and and then you have to load. But from recording the creation of template point of view, it is blindly the same concept over and over and over and over again and again for every single transaction for batch input recorded way of mass loading data into SAP. Okay, so we might be killed anytime, because the meeting may run over. So, but I'm going to just pause real quick and then